Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Problems along Southern California's coastal rail corridor are getting state attention and a lot of state money as well. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Millions of dollars to secure the train tracks between San Diego and Orange counties were hand-delivered today by the head of California's transportation agency. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne was there.
Interruptions of rail service have plagued the coastal rail line between San Diego and Orange County for the past few years. Landslides and bluff failures interrupted service between the two counties for months at a time.
It is simply not an option to accept regular shutdowns of rail service in this section of the corridor as the status quo.
Toxo Meshakin, the Secretary of California State Transportation Agency, says securing the rail line is one of his top priorities.
We can't normalize the fact that this corridor routinely shuts down and have to consistently fight every winter season or every rainy season to try to get it back open. We cannot normalize that.
Thursday, he presented $125 million in state funding to the Orange County Transportation Agency. The money will secure a 7-mile section of the rail line near San Clemente for the next 20 years.
The project that was funded today shores up the track that's in place. So what it does is it continues to support where the track is right now, and we need that for the short term as we figure out what's going to happen for the long term.
State Senator Catherine Blakespear says San Clemente is similar to Del Mar, where the rail line will at some point need to be relocated.
But it will be much less expensive for us to make those long-term improvements and get going on that than it will to continue to fight nature, which is the ocean is rising.
She says interruptions to service interrupt more than just passenger travel.
There are $1 billion of freight goods that travel every year along this line. We also, it's for military readiness, we need the line, and there are millions of passenger trips every year. So there are multiple goals that are really important that we support and maintain and grow.
The state is also awarding $38 million to North County Transit District to double-track the century-old San Luis Rey River Bridge in Oceanside and continue the bluff stabilization in Del Mar.
Really helps us out with our service. We'll be able to better manage trains through the corridor, both from a freight perspective and also passenger rail. So it's going to be a really great investment for us.
Work is expected to start in the coming months. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Well, it won't happen overnight, but there is new momentum toward ending tolls along the State Route 125 Expressway in South Bay. The 10-mile stretch of freeway mostly runs through Chula Vista. Earlier this year, an audit of the toll system found 50,000 drivers were incorrectly charged. Sandag, which manages the toll road, is looking for a new operator, but a separate audit found the agency did not specify requirements for the new system, which could lead to more of the same problems.
We've tasked our new management to return with ideas to retire the tolls as soon as it's financially feasible. We're expecting them to return with these options tomorrow.
The incorrect charges cost drivers an estimated $90,000. Sandag first learned of the issues from its former director of accounting. She is now suing for wrongful termination and retaliation. The next meeting for Sandag's board of directors is tomorrow. It's been nearly 50 years since the city and county bought Cowles Mountain. It became part of many San Diegans' weekly and even daily exercise routines. KPBS reporter Katie Anastas says a hike-a-thon is underway to raise money for Mission Trails Park maintenance.
I have a fun saying that says, a good way to change your attitude is to change the altitude.
It's the second time this week Shannara Lennox has come to Cowles Mountain to hike. She calls it an easy, hard hike. short but steep.
You can take it really slow. You can stop for 15 minutes. You could stop and have a lunch if you want to. You know, there's plenty of spots along the walk to stop. And so it really makes it low pressure if you want to take your time. Or you can put on a camel backpack and some weights and you can run up to the top and run down 2 times. And it's a great workout. So you get a little bit of the best of both worlds.
Lennox grew up in the Pacific Northwest and hiked with her family during the holidays. Now, hiking Cowles has become her new holiday tradition.
And the holidays are really cool because you see families with their kids out here, and it's kind of fun if you're not close to your family to come on a hike, say hi to random people while you're walking, and you just feel a sense of family.
The mountain is named after George Cowles, a rancher who moved to San Diego in 1877. The community that grew around his ranch was named Colestown. It later became Santee, named after his widow's second husband.
And it is pronounced Cowles, not Cowles. Many people think it's Cowles, but it's actually Cowles Mountain.
The 1960s and 70s saw substantial private development in the area.
On December 31st, 1974, the county purchased Cowles Mountain for $2.2 million to prevent it from development. The city also was part of the purchasing.
To celebrate the 50th anniversary, the Mission Trails Regional Park Foundation is putting on a hike-a-thon until mid-January. The goal is to raise $100,000 for trail maintenance, habitat restoration, and youth programs.
Cowles itself sees more than 800,000 hikers a year. So that means a lot of wear and tear. And so the trails need to be constantly maintained. Also, after a big stormy season, there's a lot of erosion and ruts in the trail.
Hike-a-thon participants can hike where, when, and how far they'd like. They can make a one-time donation or pledge an amount per mile. Mile tracking will end on January 15th. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
We still have a relatively warm weather pattern across most of the area, but tonight we're going to find a little bit of relief down into the low 50s in some spots, into the 40s for others. Ramona 47, Mount Laguna 50. Borrego Springs, you'll drop down to 57 degrees and we'll be at a similar temperature into San Diego. But as we step into Friday, the heat returns in the deserts. We're going to deal with some more warmth out there across the interior. There are big changes brewing for next week, which we're going to talk about, so stay with us.
People are already mailing in their election ballots in San Diego County, but if you want to cast a ballot in person, early voting centers will open soon. The early voting period begins on Saturday. There are nearly 40 early voting sites available. You can sort through the list at the KPBS Voter Hub at kpbs.org. Many more locations will be available on Election Day, November 5th. We're continuing our coverage of the big local races in the November election. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen is back in the studio to talk about the race for San Diego City Attorney. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Maya.
So the two candidates on the ballot are Heather Ferbert and Brian Mainshine. So who are these candidates and what are they saying in their campaigns?
Well, let's start with Brian Mainshine. He's actually been a name brand in San Diego politics for quite some time, almost a quarter century. He was first elected to the San Diego City Council in 2000. He served there until 2008. And then in 2012, he was elected to the state assembly. Interesting part of his background is that he started as a Republican. And then in 2018, he came very close to losing to a Democrat in his re-election campaign to the state assembly. 3 months after that election, he switched his party and became a Democrat. Now, he said that these are the first 2 years of Donald Trump as president. He said the party was moving too far to the right. And also at the same time, he, in his years of public service, had gotten more liberal. And since then, he's really been embraced by the Democratic establishment. He has the endorsement from the County Democratic Party, a lot of the interest groups that are allied with the Democratic Party. And, he's running on his record of the laws that he passed in the legislature, his experience in lawmaking, and says, he's got all of this support from other folks that people may recognize and may trust. And so that's sort of his platform. Heather Ferbert is a newcomer to politics. This is her first run for office. However, she has worked in the city attorney's office for a decade now and currently works as the chief deputy city attorney. So she's, at a high-level position in this office. She's really running on her experience and her independence. So she says, I've been practicing law and this specific area of municipal law that the city attorney deals with for a really long time. She says her opponent, Brian Mainshine, while he has a license to practice law, he hasn't worked as a practicing attorney in the same way that she has. She also says that all of those relationships and friendships that her opponent has built in all of his years of public service are actually a liability, and that she would be the more independent candidate because, while he has these close friendships with the mayor and some city council members, she would be in a better position, her argument is at least, to give the city council some really serious, unbiased legal advice that's not tainted by these relationships that Brian Mainshine has. Of course, he rejects this criticism. He says he'd be perfectly independent and has all of the relevant experience.
So tell us, is there a favorite in the race right now?
Yeah, well, we don't have a lot of public opinion polling at this point, but we do have the results from the primary election. And in the primary, Ferbert came out with 53% of the vote and Mainshine came out with 47%. I would not put too much stock in those numbers. It was a primary election, so it wasn't the deciding moment in this race. But it does kind of suggest that there may be some advantage that Ferbert has. An interesting element or dynamic in this race is there is a lot of outside spending, a lot of these independent expenditure committees that are mostly supporting Brian Mainshine. And there's money from SDG&E in there. There's money from the tobacco company Philip Morris, the gambling establishments and their industry trade group in California is also supporting the super PAC that is backing Brian Mainshine. So from that perspective, you could see Heather Ferbert as the underdog, at least from a campaign finance standpoint. But she does have this very great advantage in that right next to her name, it's going to say on the ballot, Chief Deputy City Attorney. And that almost makes her look like an incumbent because she's working in this office and she does have the endorsement of the current city attorney. So, the primary happened several months ago. A lot has changed since then, and this is a pretty low information rate. So it's really, I would say, a toss-up in terms of, where we're going to see this race go.
Well, we really do appreciate the comparison. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen, thanks.
Thank you, Maya.
And we have a lot more of our election coverage at the KPBS Voter Hub. You can find the link on our homepage at kpbs.org. Some of the features include explainers on many of the high-profile races and ballot measures. The KPBS Voter Hub is also available in Spanish. At the national level, recent polling shows the presidential race is still very close between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Last night, CNN hosted a town hall forum and invited both candidates. Trump declined, but Harris accepted. A short time ago, Trump held a rally in Arizona and had this to say about his opponent.
I watched last night. She did a town hall. Honestly, it was pathetic. It was pathetic. There's never been anything like that. And my message today is very simple. Kamala's migrant invasion, given to us through gross incompetence, disqualifies her from even thinking about being president. We can't let that happen. No person who is responsible for so much bloodshed and death on our soil can ever be allowed to become the president of the United States. What she's done and he's done. Crooked Joe and Kamala, what a combination. Worst combination in the history of our country.
And we are now 12 days from election night. Juliet Benbrook has more on last night's town hall and what the vice president had to say to undecided voters.
Vice President Kamala Harris spoke directly to voters during a CNN town hall moderated by Anderson Cooper Wednesday night. Part of her strategy in these final weeks was on full display as she presented herself as a candidate who can bring change, a new generation of leadership.
Vice President Kamala Harris taking questions from voters in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania.
It is close, but there are undecided voters who clearly, by being here, have an open mind, want to talk in a way that is grounded in issues and fact.
Tackling the top issues like the economy, immigration, and abortion rights.
This is probably one of the most fundamental freedoms that we as Americans could imagine, which is the freedom to literally make decisions about your own body.
Sharpening her message to voters.
The vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And I think that the American people deserve to have a president who is grounded in what is common sense, what is practical, and what is in the best interest of the people, not themselves.
And taking her opponent, former President Donald Trump, head on.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted.
Polls show there's no clear leader in this race. And Pennsylvania, where this town hall took place, is one of 3 blue wall states that flipped for Trump in 2016 and then swung back for Democrats in 2020. Reporting in Pennsylvania, I'm Julia Van Brook.
And we do want to let you know about our plans for election night. KPBS will have special coverage of the local results starting at 10 o'clock on television and streaming online. We will also have updates throughout the night on KPBS FM. President Joe Biden will be in Arizona tomorrow, where he will issue a formal apology on behalf of the government over its use of Native American boarding schools. Biden departed the White House this afternoon, and this will be his first official visit to an indigenous community as president. Nearly 1,000 children died at Native American boarding schools funded by the U.S. Funding for those schools ended in 1969. El Cajon is home to one of the largest communities of Iraqi refugees in the United States. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson says a new documentary looks at the consequences of the government undercounting them.
The U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, promising democracy. Those who fled to El Cajon are questioning whether they can find democracy here.
Here we have freedom of expression, but my voice will not go out of the door.
That's Dilquas Ahmad. The documentary Baghdad, California, follows her efforts to get her fellow Iraqis counted by the U.S. Census. A lot's at stake, she tells one mosque.
هذا صح. إذا إحنا ما نثبت العدد الموجود هنا بالكاهون وبسان دياغو ما راح يوفروا لنا خدمات.
If we don't prove our real percentage in El Cajon, she says, they will not provide us any services or political representation. The documentary says El Cajon City Council has never included a woman of color. Ahmad was trying to change that, but COVID interrupted the 2020 census. Reports say minorities were even more undercounted than they were in 2010. The city council said El Cajon's demographics didn't change enough. It kept its old political map. The events take place years ago, but co-director Diego Lynch says the documentary is just as relevant this November.
It's about the system of American democracy and the challenges we all face to, have some sort of, have our voices matter.
The New Americans Museum will screen Baghdad, California this Saturday at 11 a.m. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
And speaking of museums, the Women's Museum of California has officially merged with the San Diego History Center. It was announced today. The Women's Museum was first established in 1983 and has integrated its collection into the History Center, which was founded in 1928. The San Diego History Center operates its museum and archives in Balboa Park, as well as Junipero Serra Museum in Presidio Park. And the merger should be complete by the end of next year, that's 2025. I recently took a look at some of the Women's Museum's collection that was brought over to the History Center, and you can check that feature out on kpbs.org and the KPBS YouTube page. Another Disney theme park is raising its prices. Disney World in Orlando says prices for next year's peak dates, and that includes the holiday season, will top out at $199. Now that is a jump of about $10 in fact. Disneyland also announced higher admission prices recently. Entry to the theme park in Anaheim can cost as much as $206 and even more for park hopper passes and other perks.
Well, we are dealing with still some warm weather for now, and we're going to have to keep an eye out for some fire danger. The dry weather continues. We do have those low clouds returning late at night and into the early part of each day, and then we'll see brighter skies even for the coastal areas. For the most part, into the middle of the afternoon. A cool down begins next weekend, and it will get much cooler with that gusty breeze by Tuesday and Wednesday. So look forward to changes here. We're not there yet, though. Low clouds near the coast, 57 degrees for your overnight low, and we'll be at a similar value there into places like Borrego Springs. But during the day, it's off to the races there into the deserts as temperatures really heat up, and near the coast, the temperature change is going to be a little more muted by that ocean influence, as we are so used to. That makes it such a nice place to be here. San Diego, 73, gorgeous weather. Morning clouds, a brighter afternoon. El Cajon, 83. Ramona, 86. So you get up into Borrego Springs, we're around 94 degrees. So there is some autumn warmth there. And on Saturday, the heat is still with us. In fact, a lot of us in the Great Basin are going to be a little warmer, and it's kind of the status quo here in far Southern California. But look at this. Early next week, some of our neighbors to the north will begin to see a little snow return to the Sierra, the Cascades, the Rockies. In fact, the first ski resort in the nation opened up on Tuesday, Wolf Creek Pass there in southern Colorado. So they're open for business already. We have a little ways to go here in California before we build that snowpack up, but it will turn much cooler. So the coastal forecast, you'll notice a change. We're going to go from 77 on our warmest day Sunday down to the low 70s Monday and Tuesday. Relatively pleasant weather. Look at those overnight lows, though, dropping from 58 Sunday night to 48 on Tuesday night. That'll be a big change. Inland areas, we're going to see an even greater difference here. From 84 Saturday down to 69 degrees on Tuesday. And into the mountains we go. Here we drop to 50. Almost cold out there, chillier pattern. It'll get breezy out there as well. And some fire danger will accompany that, even though it will get cooler. We're going to deal with about a 21-degree drop from the warmest day in the deserts being Saturday to a much cooler 74 on Tuesday. So big changes are brewing. We have a lot to look forward to if you like the cooler autumn weather. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
I'm Amna Navaz. Tonight on the News Hour, where the U.S. presidential candidates stand on the nation's pressing foreign policy issues. It's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The Pentagon recently announced it was upgrading discharge codes for people forced out of the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer spoke to one veteran who says the Pentagon still hasn't done enough.
It doesn't even begin to address people like me who were discharged prior to the initiation of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Melissa Johnson is an employment lawyer in San Diego. Back in the early 1980s, she was in the Air Force.
I was discharged because of my sexual orientation prior to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell period.
The military's ban on LGBTQ+ people serving ended in 2011. Before then, though, thousands were forced out of the military under the Pentagon's discriminatory policy. Some service members left with administrative discharges. Others faced criminal charges. Many received so-called bad paper discharges that left them little or no veterans benefits. The Pentagon reviewed the records of the roughly 13,000 people forced out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell from 1993 to 2011. It says 96% of them now have honorable discharge codes. It says people forced out prior to 1993 should request relief through a board process where they have a high chance of success. Johnson says it's not enough.
For me personally, I've never applied to upgrade my discharge because you have to go back. Yeah, I mean, I have my military record. A lot of people don't. You have to go back and get it. You have to fill out the paperwork. You have to, and basically it just reopens those old wounds, and it's really painful for people.
A group of veterans sued the Pentagon last year to force it to fix the bad paper discharges of everyone affected by its longtime ban. The attorneys behind that lawsuit declined to comment for this report, but this summer a judge denied a Pentagon motion to dismiss the suit. Johnson's hopeful it will next be granted class action status, which would add tens of thousands of veterans as plaintiffs. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
History is everywhere in San Diego. You just have to know where to find it. As Ken Kramer shows us in this story about San Diego, sometimes it's right under our feet.
Okay, I want to show you something in San Marcos on South Rancho Santa Fe Road. Thousands of cars zipping by this intersection with Meadowlark Ranch Road every day, and almost nobody knows what they're driving right past. Just a little flat spot right in the median, see it? You wouldn't notice it if you were driving. So what is it? Well, you know, in Old Town, San Diego, there was El Campo Santo, a Catholic cemetery that dates back to 1849. Just a small yard today, but it used to be bigger before Old Town grew and San Diego Avenue was paved. And there are bodies still right under what is now the sidewalk in the street. A plaque shows where they are, and there are little metal grave markers that most people don't notice or know that they're driving or walking right over an old grave. And you probably know, same thing in Mission Hills, Pioneer Park, grass and trees, place for picnics, there's a playground, it's really nice, and it's right over as many as 4,000 graves. Few headstones, too, off to one side if you know where to look. Used to be this was Calvary Cemetery from 1875 into the 1950s, and yes, the bodies are still there, 6 feet under what is now a public park. Which brings us back here to San Marcos, where once was the Meadowlark Pioneer Cemetery, dating back to about 1900. It was small, only about 7 graves, and when traffic engineers wanted to widen Rancho Santa Fe Road, it was thought, well, we'll just dig up and move the graves to another cemetery, and the families said no. So they weren't moved. The road was built around the graves instead, and there they are in the median strip now, marked by a cross and a plaque. And also on the sidewalk is a monument, which is easier and safer to see, that pays tribute to those who, even though they're out there in the middle of a busy roadway, rest in peace. Their graves among the things undisturbed and mostly unnoticed about San Diego.
And if you want to see more of Ken Kramer's stories about San Diego, he has a half hour of them every Thursday night at 8 o'clock right here on KPBS. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. A star-studded World Series begins tomorrow in L.A. NPR's Morning Edition will focus on MVP Shohei Ohtani, who is playing on baseball's biggest stage for the first time. And KPBS Roundtable is talking about the upcoming election and the issues for Latino voters. That airs at noon on KPBS-FM. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.